So, guys, who would have thought that a piece of fabric could be so important in a series like Game of Thrones, right? But the bedding is a tradition that the Westerosi take very seriously, so much so that it has even become a meme on the internet. After all, who hasn't heard of the expression "the bed is fertilized"? But joking aside, bedding is really an important symbol in Westerosi weddings. After all, it's how noble families come together to ensure the continuity of their lineage and strengthen their political alliances. And of course, we can't forget about the importance of the bride's virginity, which is proven by the famous stain on her bedding. Did you know there's actually a technique for creating this stain convincingly? That's right, costume designers took this tradition very seriously and created a technique involving red wine and some cornstarch. It's no wonder that bedding is considered one of Game of Thrones' most important costume pieces. But not everything about this tradition is rosy. The pressure on women to prove their virginity can be quite oppressive and sexist. Additionally, bedding can also be used as a political weapon, a way to guarantee power and influence over other noble houses. And let's not forget that Sansa Stark herself suffered greatly from this tradition when she was forced to marry cruel Ramsay Bolton and endure a traumatic wedding night. Anyway, now that we know more about the importance of bedding in Game of Thrones, why don't we remember some memorable moments involving this tradition? Bedding in Westerosi. To understand the importance of bedding in Westerosi, one must first understand how it is produced. In the series, most bedding is made from cotton, linen, or wool, depending on the region and climate. These fibers are hand-spun and woven on looms, usually by women from noble houses or city seamstresses. In addition, bedding can also be decorated with embroidery, lace, and other details that make it more beautiful and sophisticated. And it is precisely this beauty that makes bedding such an important item in weddings in Westerosi. First of all, we cannot fail to mention that bedding is practically a character in Game of Thrones, with its own importance and symbolism. After all, it is the piece that proves the bride's virginity and seals alliances between the noble houses of Westerosi. Not to mention that it is an object of desire for many fans of the series who want to bring a little piece of this universe to their own beds. But anyway, getting back to the fun part, did you know there are many funny memes involving bedding in Game of Thrones? For example, there's one that shows a photo of bedding and says, "When you finally find true love and decide to get married in Westerosi." Or even one that jokes about the difficulty of finding white bedding after so many bloody wedding nights. Anyway, despite its dark sides, bedding is an important tradition in Game of Thrones and helps give depth to the universe of the series. And if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you've probably dreamed about having such bedding for yourself, or maybe even getting married in a Westerosi-style ceremony complete with opulent banquets and a pet dragon. Just don't forget to keep your virginity intact and not irritate any Lannisters along the way. The wedding in Westerosi. First of all, it's important to mention that weddings in Westerosi are very different from what we're used to seeing in our own lives. For starters, they are much more elaborate and full of pomp. Imagine a ceremony with dozens of important guests, a banquet with dozens of sophisticated dishes, and bedding that can change the course of an entire kingdom's history. It's a lot. In addition, marriage in Westerosi is often not a matter of love, but rather politics and power. Most couples are united for reasons of alliance between noble houses or to ensure the continuity of a family's lineage. Love is often something that takes a back seat. But despite all this, there are still many funny and entertaining things about weddings in Westerosi. For example, who can forget the famous Red Wedding? The wedding that made headlines and shocked fans around the world. The scene where the music starts playing and the massacre begins is unforgettable and still gives many people chills. Another curious thing is that many characters on Game of Thrones have multiple wives or husbands, which can cause some confusion. After all, how do you know who is the true wife or husband of a particular character? It's madness. And speaking of confusion, we cannot forget about Tyrion Lannister and Sansa Stark's infamous wedding. This was one of the most bizarre unions on the show, since both characters had nothing in common and clearly did not want to marry each other. But their union was forced for political reasons, and they had to deal with its consequences. Finally, we cannot forget that weddings in Westerosi are surrounded by traditions and rituals, from bedding proving virginity to breaking bread over groom's head for fertility prosperity. Everything helps create a world rich in details and traditions, making series even more interesting. Anyway, the wedding in Westerosi is such an amusing topic filled with peculiarities. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you've probably dreamed of getting married like a true Westerosi, with an opulent banquet, bedding, and lots of power and influence over an entire kingdom. Just be careful not to end up as one of the victims of the famous Red Wedding. The tradition of bedding. The tradition of bedding in Westerosi is one of the most interesting in the Game of Thrones universe. When you think about wedding traditions, you might imagine a variety of rituals and customs, but the tradition of bedding is undoubtedly unique. During the wedding ceremony in Westerosi, bride and groom are taken to their nuptial chamber, where they are left alone to consummate their marriage. But before that happens, the bed linen must be displayed to prove that the marriage has been successfully consummated. The bed linen is proudly displayed on day after ceremony, and all present are invited to see bloodstains which supposedly prove consummation. The tradition is considered a sign for good luck and fertility. Many families believe it's vital for safety and continuity of their lineage. In fact, some even keep bloodstained bed linens as family treasure, passing them down from generation to generation as symbolizing continuation. Although this may seem strange for modern viewers, it's an important part of folklore and culture in Westerosi. Moreover, it adds extra touch, drama, and suspense at weddings on GOT series. Who can forget seeing when Sansa and Tyrion's wedding was interrupted by Lannister's attack? But like everything else on Game of Thrones, the tradition also has its critics. Some argue that it's outdated and sexist since it puts unnecessary pressure on women to prove their virginity and fertility. However, others claim that this just reflects fictional world where story takes place and shouldn't be seen as affirmation any values or beliefs from real world. Regardless your opinion about bedding tradition, it's impossible to deny its importance in Westerosi culture and tradition. And for Game of Thrones fans, the tradition adds another fascinating layer of complexity and history to this incredible fictional world. Curiosities about the bedding in Game of Thrones. Did you know that the bedding in Game of Thrones was much more than just a prop? There are many interesting facts about its use in the series. Let's check out some of them. The production of Game of Thrones made sure to use authentic and high-quality bedding for wedding scenes. Some were even hand-embroidered. For scenes where the bedding is burned, a special fabric that imitates flames was used. This is because producers did not want to set real bedding on fire. In some wedding scenes, you can see that the bedding is stained with blood. This was done to symbolize consummation, which often involved sexual violence. In other scenes, the bedding is carefully arranged to form the symbol of the house where the wedding is taking place. This detail shows attention to every little aspect by producers. For scenes where characters are poisoned during a wedding, beddings are used to disguise their fall so as not to ruin the scene. It's impressive how important beddings can be in cinematography. Furthermore, it's interesting how beddings are used as a symbolic element in Game of Thrones. They represent union between two houses, consummation of marriage, and even beginning a new dynasty. Finally, it's worth noting that beddings in Game of Thrones have become an iconic element of the series, and many fans love recreating wedding scenes at home using similar beddings. These are just some curiosities about beddings in Game of Thrones. As you can see, they're much more than simple props. They're an important part of Westerosi's marriage tradition and powerful symbols within this world. Well, now that you know everything about Westerosi's bedding tradition, maybe you're wondering, so what? After all, why does this matter for us young people living in 21st century? Well, first off, it's always interesting learning different cultures and traditions from around the world, even if they're fictional like those in Westerosi. This helps us broaden our worldview and better understand the diversity that exists within our own society. Moreover, it's always important to remember that traditions have a very strong symbolic power. They can represent values and beliefs that are important to a community and help strengthen the cultural identity of a people. This is something we can learn from Westerosi's bedding tradition. It's a powerful symbol of union and celebration, representing the importance of marriage and forming new families. Finally, we cannot forget about the importance of entertainment in our lives. After all, watching series like Game of Thrones can be a fun and exciting way to escape routine and have some fun. And if you're a fan of this series, knowing everything about beddings will certainly enrich your experience while watching it. So now that you know everything about beddings in Westerosi, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel for more curiosities and discussions on Game of Thrones as well as other series? Don't waste any time. Click on the subscription button right now. And remember, if someone invites you to a wedding in Westerosi, don't forget to bring your best bedding. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave your like or share with friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take advantage now so you won't miss out on any news. See you in the next video.
If you liked the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll stay here until next time.